Tier 5 might be very unfriendly to melee, but warriors can come in hot with their new gear and actually dominate on overall damage if they are played well and they do have a good group composition to support them. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm just going to have a quick conversation about warriors and rogues and how strong they are in tier 5 content. Now, there's a huge stigma, pretty much a massive stigma, around TBC where melee classes are seen as not nearly as powerful or as useful as a lot of the range classes. Melee are extremely gear dependent, and so as we get a lot more gear, obviously with tier 5 content, are they going to be stronger? Are they going to be more solid? And will DPS warriors be able to keep up? Will rogues be able to keep up? Because they're the kings of classic, and now they're kind of not. So with that being said, let's dive right into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is pull up just kind of some logs, just some general logs from SSC and TK. So you can see that very few raids on the public logs are bringing warriors and rogues. For the most part, they might be bringing one rogue or one warrior. So diving through a ton of logs, it seems like you're seeing very, very few Fury warriors and very, very few rogues, if even that. And then I've got some logs from my own testing runs with other streamers. So I'm going to end up playing that in the background. But you can see that like rogues can do just fine here. This was on a character in a non-optimal situation, but in general, in TBC, it doesn't matter what class you are, you need a group comp to support you. This is just a universal fact of TBC and probably my least favorite thing about the expansion. Rogues are able to absolutely pump. You can see on single target with no new gear, you can easily be at like 2.6k to 3k during your actual burst. But the real advantage we get is from our cleave. Melee classes probably have the strongest cleave up to a point. Obviously, mages have the best cleave for a large amount of targets, and then warlocks with Seed of Corruption. But up to 4 targets, nothing beats a warrior, and straight up on 2 targets, nothing beats a rogue. So you actually have these classes that are extremely powerful for specific situations, mainly speedrun situations, trash, and cleave. These are huge, right? So rogues and warriors, they don't need to sit or drink ever, so you never need to stop if you're looking towards speedruns. Rogues and warriors also can do a ton of damage on cleave, although rogues are massively gimped by the fact that Blade Flurry is a 2-minute cooldown, and I think this is the biggest flaw of the class in general for PvE. If we just had 2 charges or like a 45-second cooldown, rogues would be amazing. But until we get something changed there, we are on a 2-minute cooldown for rogues to be a lot more powerful. So I'm going to start by, let's just talk about rogues first then. How are rogues doing in tier 5 content? Because tier 5 content is notoriously unfriendly to melee classes. Tier 5 content is the raids where everyone actually from TBC private servers usually is talking about how melee don't do that well, mainly because in tier 5 there's a lot of mechanics that are very punishing. You can see I have a death counter on the stream or on the screen because this was me going in with the pug and just seeing how many times I'm gonna die, because in your first few times in TK, especially, sometimes SSC, but more so TK, there's a lot of mobs that do whirlwinds that can kill you in like 1 to 2 seconds. So you have to be very cautious about dealing with all of those. That's like the biggest thing for tier 5 content. For melee is that you're always going to be aware of what can kill you. A lot of things can kill you really fast. Now, rogues bring utility to the raid itself, mainly in the aspect of exposed armor, improved exposed armor, or you could be running the Hemo build, which is a PvE build for Hemo that you still have things like Blade Flurry, and it's giving you the Hemo debuff on all targets. It's nice for trash because you're building up the damage of the rest of your raid on those targets with the Hemo debuff. Either way, a lot of the content in tier 5 is very easy for rogue and warrior, but rogue in specific does a lot better here than it was doing in tier 4 content, because in 10 mans you don't really have a group that's perfectly set up for you. In 25 mans you are basically just fighting bosses, and where melee classes can excel the most is generally on overall damage. But rogue falls behind on that again because of the lack of blade flurry. So really the big thing for rogues in tier 5 content is that we finally start getting some like armor penetration with an insane trinket from Void Reaver that is probably one of the best trinkets in the game. I've yet to have it drop and be able to test it, but it is amazing. Warp Spring Coil giving you 1,000 armor pen on proc. Later on in tier 6 content is where rogues will really shine, when we have static haste and armor penetration like crazy. That's the biggest thing holding us back right now. That's why we're not scaling so well. It's because of gear limitations. But you're pretty much not going to be beating anyone on the charts, or you shouldn't be beating anyone good on the charts as a rogue, unfortunately, even on overall damage. That being said, that's basically where rogues are. But giant caveat, warriors on the other hand, fury warriors, they bring no utility to the raid, but they bring insane overall damage. A good fury warrior with a good group composition actually destroys almost anyone on overall damage. Both of these classes scale well with gear, but fury warriors aren't limited by blade flurry being on a 2-minute CD. They're not limited by having no cleave. Fury warriors, and albeit arms warriors, are hugely important to tier 5 content and beyond, especially as we're moving towards speedruns, as that kind of becomes a thing again. So we will see a lot of groups probably end up running with a fury warrior, sometimes two. It'll kind of depend on what your group composition is, but on overall damage, and I can't really show you this right now because of personal limitations, I would say, but you'll see on the first few weeks of SSE and such, that some Fury Warriors are going to absolutely dominate the charts. There's so much trash that you're actually just going to go in and dumpster everyone in a lot of pulls. Now, there are the pulls where an Arcane Mage can't be beat, or the pulls where a Shadow Warlock or a Warlock in general won't be beat. This also happens that they do scale decently well with their new gear, especially Arcane Mages who get 20% damage on their Arcane Blast, but this is more so for overall damage. That just like kind of pads them out, and then Arcane Explosion keeps them feeling nice and juicy. Warriors, though, still will be able to come in and absolutely destroy. Now, from the logs I showed you earlier, overall damage, you might be kind of like checking it on your own raids. Overall damage, a lot of guilds are seeing Warlocks as number 1 on overall damage on their testing. Warlocks, some are seeing Hunters and some are seeing an Arcane Mage, but from going through like actually hundreds of logs, I've found that almost never is anyone doing more damage on overall damage than a very solid Fury Warrior. You do need to be extremely cautious about mechanics, like I was kind of mentioning a second ago, that there's a lot of things that are very punishing, a lot of mobs that'll do whirlwinds, and there's things like Alar where the boss will just run away from you, and it's easier to get more uptime on a range than it is on a melee. Now, this isn't saying that these classes are insane in these next tier, but it is saying that they're actually great, right? They're actually a lot more solid than most people have been talking about them, most people have thought about them. Fury Warriors are extremely strong moving on, and I can almost guarantee that every top guild in the world is looking at the potential for Fury Warriors. Everyone is looking at how powerful they are, how powerful they can be, and we're all kind of paying attention for every one of these classes to scale really well with their tier 6 gear. Will these classes be utilized that much? Probably not as much as they should be, but a good Fury Warrior is actually going to help your raid a ton in damage. They can actually pretty much be number 1 in overall damage if they really play well and have the group composition again. And that's pretty much it Guys, Fury Warriors are going to do great in Tier 5 content if they play well and respect mechanics, and Rogues are going to be slightly stronger than they are right now. The huge thing is having this armor pen, especially on your cleave, for whenever you're actually popping Blade Flurry. It's going to be really, really nice. And the gear scales really well with Rogues. So it's going to be nice to have this crazy, crazy 4-piece, which is actually insane. So Rogues are getting a lot stronger. But then again, every class is getting a lot stronger. The class that really shines in this conversation for today is Fury Warriors, mainly because now we've got so much trash. They have so much uptime on damage, and their cleave damage is just amazing. Anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. I hope to see you guys all out there in Tier 5 content. There's actually a ton of fun things you can do in Tier 5 content that are really, really exciting. So I hope to keep you guys all updated on those. There's a lot of tips and tricks we've actually discovered that I'll be sharing pretty much right after Race to World First. All right, from there, guys, everyone have a great, great day, and I'll see you all on the next one.